This next bull phase, I think we're going to see, I'm thinking at least 160, 180,000 Bitcoin, 8, 9, 10,000 Ethereum. I mean, I'm being conservative. Solana probably could double from here. I've always thought that even a year or 2 years ago, sort of 150 to 180 was my target based on the way things have moved in previous bears to bulls the last 3 cycles. I don't know if you have any, our companies today are all like kicking butt. I didn't get into that, but I mean, almost all of them are near record revenue or will be in the next, few months.
My general view is I hate the conservative numbers, and I think it's always good to anchor yourselves on those, particularly when you're building a business. I think for me, the base case, the base case is kind of 250. So 150 low side, 250 normal, 450 blow off 2017 cycle.
By the end of 25?
Yeah.
Dan Tapiero's forecast for Bitcoin is both bold and conservative, depending on the time horizon. He anticipates Bitcoin reaching $150,000 to $180,000 in the next bull cycle, potentially hitting $250,000 under favorable conditions, with a blow-off peak of $450,000. His projections for Ethereum are equally optimistic, suggesting values between $8,000 and $10,000. These figures are grounded in historical market behavior. Tapiero notes that past bull markets have seen explosive growth in the final stages of the cycle. While a 10x surge is less likely due to Bitcoin's maturity, a 3x gain remains plausible, particularly as more institutional capital enters the space.
Please take a little time to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. You can also check out our other videos on cryptocurrencies and the overall digital asset space and drop your comments and observations in the comments section below. Everything you do helps with the YouTube algorithm and immensely contributes to the channel's growth. Thanks and enjoy the video.
So the capital has not come back into the growth equity space just yet. I think it's coming. I think we'll start to see some deals. As you mentioned, M&A, we have companies that we think are ready to be brought public. But the venture side, the venture space has come back. I mean, it's, the most risky things in our space are exploded. I mean, it's, and the VCs doing seed and pre-seed things, that's been ongoing. But the larger companies still are suffering from the fallout, the reputational fallout. The space, the space's reputation was damaged for those external, larger $50 billion funds, $100 billion US pension funds, or larger institutional entities that were sort of duped into some of the fraudulent names. Look, there still is a little bit of a Wild West component to the space. I do feel like we are pioneers. I've said this to you before. It's like 1840 and we're heading west and we're pioneers, and there are all sorts of dastardly dudes and all sorts of people are out to get you. It's like you're going out to dig for gold and you find a little gold and then, all of a sudden someone tries to rob you. And so, I mean, there's a little bit of that. I think we're moving away from that. But you get things like FTX and they're the poster child. So anyway, this next bull phase, I think we're going to see, I'm thinking at least 160, 180,000 Bitcoin, 8, 9, 10,000 Ethereum. I mean, I'm being conservative. Solana probably could double from here. I've always thought that even a year or 2 years ago, sort of 150 to 180 was my target based on the way things have moved in previous bears to bulls the last 3 cycles. I don't know if you have any, our companies today are all like kicking butt. I didn't get into that, but I mean, almost all of them are near record revenue or will be in the next, few months.
My general view is I hate the conservative numbers, and I think it's always good to anchor yourselves on those, particularly when you're building a business. I think for me, the base case, the base case is kind of 250. So 150 low side, 250 normal, 450 blow off 2017 cycle.
By the end of 25.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think
don't forget, I was 2017.
Yeah.
I sold out at 2000 in
I
just before that, the usual tax season where it falls in like March, April, May, June, right? I sold out 2000. It went up 10x in 4 months at the end of the year. 10x.
Yeah, but those are smaller numbers. We can't go up 10x.
No, but that's why I'm saying. That's why I'm saying. Listen, it's possible to go up 3x in the last part of the cycle if we get a very strong cycle. That's all I'm saying is that I think that tail is because people have so much PTSD. I think it's underpriced. I'm not saying it's my base case,
but you know how much value will be added to the digital asset.
I think your number of 10 trillion is.
Yeah,
I think 10 trillion is underestimating it for this cycle. I think it's close to 12, 13, something like that. This cycle. Yeah. I think your whole 10T idea is going to sound hilariously outdated very soon.
It brings me right back to the beginning. The first thing we discussed. You can tell where somebody entered the space because 10T will be a joke. It wasn't when it was 300 billion in 2019. 30x, people were like, "You're nuts. There's no way." But yeah, I think 10 will be too small by far, right?
Yeah, way too. I mean, I think within 10 years, if I just follow the log regression channel of market cap, or use a Bitcoin version and impute something out of it, I get to 100 trillion by 2034. Now that makes sense because all other assets are 100, 200, 300 trillion. A lot of assets are going on to this. There's going to be a lot of activity. I don't think that's wildly wrong. That kind of suggests we're only 3% there because it's 3 trillion today. It's
what was that first call you had? Did you call for Bitcoin? What was that very first one in that article?
So I said, I think it's worth $1 million. It's worth 700 ounces of gold at the time.
What year was that?
That was 2013.
Okay,
and I said, I'm going to discount myself by 90% because this sounds stupid to call for $1 million Bitcoin when it's 200. So I'm going to say 100 grand. So we hit my original target from 11 years ago. And I still think we'll hit the other target, which is now 700 ounces of gold is now $2 and a bit million. So I do think somewhere, and that was a bad math calculation, random numbers based on stock to flow, but that kind of feels about right.
Yeah.
That sounds about right,
Ethereum, despite being overshadowed by Bitcoin, remains a critical component of the digital asset ecosystem. Tapiero highlights Ethereum's undervaluation relative to Bitcoin, especially during bearish phases. He notes that the Ethereum community lacks a prominent figure akin to Michael Saylor for Bitcoin, which could help rally sentiment and drive adoption. The broader altcoin market, while still recovering from the downturn, shows signs of life. Explosive gains in certain assets indicate renewed interest, particularly among retail investors. However, Tapiero cautions against tribalism within the crypto community, emphasizing that emotional extremes often lead to poor investment decisions.
Yeah, I wonder, it's interesting because we're talking about these big numbers. And of course, you've got Michael Saylor out there who's, sucked a lot of air out of the room. Rightfully so. I think he's been incredible for the space. But I haven't sort of sensed as much enthusiasm yet as in previous cycles, right? Like I don't feel somehow, I don't know, maybe it's because some of these altcoins, etc., are still down 90%. If you look at some of them, not Ripple, which is now exploded, but some of these.
Yeah, we just started to sit in the last 2 weeks where things are doing 50% in a day. That's what brings in retail. And I know from my WhatsApp messages that people are coming back, but these were, I'm only getting back last cycle people and not new cycle people yet.
Right. So we're not above where we were in 21 in terms of emotion and this and that.
No.
I mean, it's very I mean, if you're new to this space, you might think, oh, it's crazy, it's this, it's that. It feels very tempered. People feel like, I feel like ho-hum. So I feel like the volatility in this space is really chews people up.
It does. Particularly, Dan, you know this because you see it. Building a business in a very volatile asset means that your cost base has to become flexible. Absolutely. That's the hardest part, right? The hardest part is the cyclicality of your revenues versus your cost base, which means every time you have a down cycle, you spend 18 months of firing people. And it's so that is really hard.
Hire them on the up move, which is kind of, you try to game it a little bit, right? You
do, but it's hard. I mean, I was with one of the blockchain, one of the centralized exchange guys at Barry Silvert's thing. Yeah, and they're like, we're done. We just can't do. It's hard. And this guy,
you mean tired?
Tired.
That's like in their mid-30s who are just wiped from 10 years.
Like, we fired 77% of our staff. Yeah. And now we're having to rebuild again. And now we're desperately trying to hire staff. And it's like, this is just too hard.
It's difficult. I agree. I wonder, look, I think the volatility sort of going forward, next 10 years can't possibly be what it's been the last 10 years. But the way markets work, everyone always gives up at the exact wrong time.
Always.
Like it's so good. And
it's like Bitcoin ETH right now, right? That cross, you've been pointing it out. It was like,
I'm not watching the cross. I just watch the price.
I'm watching the cross and just hearing people just capitulate. ETH's a piece of shit. It's never going anywhere. They've screwed it up. Vitalik's a moron. I'm like, we've seen this all before.
Right. And at 2,500, it was really low. 2,700 a few weeks ago, I started looking at it. And I just thought, this is way too cheap. With Bitcoin at 80,000, this is ridiculous. And I started putting out some tweets. I tweeted something last night, like ETH not dead. They kept saying ETH. And there's such like rivalry or, tribal behavior. Tribal behavior is always wrong. It's just like buying at an emotional extreme when you feel great is always wrong. Selling when you are feeling bad is always wrong. So, it just felt like, the ETH community, I guess at the moment, doesn't really have a sailor. It doesn't have a guy out there, with an enormous amount of energy. I mean, Vitalik's a programmer. He's thinking about stuff, the nuts and bolts, as are some of the other.
Tapiero reflects on his early predictions for Bitcoin, which once seemed overly ambitious, but have since proven prescient. His initial target of $100,000, based on Bitcoin's stock-to-flow model, was met. Looking ahead, he sees Bitcoin reaching equivalence with gold in terms of value, potentially hitting $2 million per coin. This growth, he argues, is inevitable as blockchain technology reshapes the global financial system. The journey, however, will not be without obstacles. Regulatory challenges, market volatility, and reputational issues must be navigated carefully. For investors, the key is to maintain a long-term perspective and avoid being swayed by short-term market noise.
Please like and subscribe my channel.